titled JD Vance's Audacious Attack Demands Kamala Harris Show Gratitude to White Male Power. And yesterday at a campaign stop in Ohio, JD Vance said that Kamala Harris shouldn't lead the country because she isn't grateful for it. Seriously, this is what he said, and I quote. He said, you know what I see? Want to take bets here? Want to start a betting pool just in this auditorium? If you want to lead this country, you should feel grateful for it, a sense of gratitude. I never hear that gratitude come through when I listen to Kamala Harris. What's he talking about here? I think, I've got my secret GOP decoder ring here. And, the white myth of America, which JD Vance echoed at his RNC speech, I mentioned that at some length yesterday, is that our nation was built by white men. Of course, ignoring the black, Asian, Hispanic labor and that of women of all races that actually built much of this nation. And for the record, Kamala Harris is the parent of 2 immigrants, and explicitly, just one from India, one from Jamaica, and just comes right out and says all the time, as part of her standard stump speech, how her parents came to America and found a land of opportunity, and whoever thought that a little black girl from wherever, I guess she lived in Wisconsin actually for a while, could grow up to be vice president of the United States. She's clearly grateful for America. And that's why it's fairly obvious that when JD Vance said this, he wasn't talking about real gratitude or expressions of gratitude. What he was talking about was that she's not sufficiently deferential. That women, particularly black women, but women in general, and I'll expand on this in a moment, need to be humble in the face of white wealth and power. And instead of, gratefully deferring to the white men who are born to rule, she's a pretender to the role of president, a usurper of the power and privilege that never should have been in the hands of a woman, particularly a woman of color. Keep in mind, this is the same JD Vance who, along with 8 other Republican senators and about 24 members of the House, Republican members of the House, one of those other senators was Ted Cruz, by the way, who's also up for re-election this year, wrote a letter to HHS Secretary Javier Becerra. What was that letter about? Well, Javier Becerra issued a rule. He runs Health and Human Services, and he issued a rule nationwide that says that police cannot demand the health records of women, menstruation records, pregnancy records, whatever. What the Republicans are particularly interested in is menstruation records. That police cannot just go to a doctor's office or a hospital and say, I want the records of this woman so-and-so, without a court order. And so JD Vance and Ted Cruz and 6 of their colleagues in the Senate, Republicans, wrote a letter to Javier Becerra saying, you can't do that. You need to immediately withdraw that rule. Why? Because they want police to be able to access the menstrual and other health records so that prosecutors and police in red states can keep track of women. This is the menstrual police. Can keep track of women and find out when they're pregnant, and then, catch them if they order some mail order mifepristone, or if they travel out of state to get an abortion, they can nail them. I'm not even speculating here. They will tell you that. Vance and Cruz and the Republicans on the Supreme Court, they're all big fans of the menstrual police. Why? Well, because when women can't control their reproductive capacity, it's very difficult for them to sustain a career in the workforce or in politics, which is exactly what Republicans, the goal of Republicans is to remove women from the workforce, competition for men, and from government. Pretty straightforward stuff. And so, now it kind of falls into context that Harris's lack of a submissive attitude of gratitude to rich white men like Trump, Vance, and the billionaires who own the GOP, and, is the logical result of the white men on the Supreme Court in 1965 in the Griswold case, which legalized birth control, And in 73, the Roe v. Wade case that legalized abortion, letting her have a career as a district attorney and a prosecutor and a state attorney general and the vice president. They let her, and she's not grateful for that. She's not sufficiently appreciative. I mean, JD Vance is pretty clear about this stuff. In 2022, when he was running for the U.S. Senate, which, by the way, was his first and only public experience, public office experience. This was the same year, by the way, that a 10-year-old girl who was raped by a relative had to flee Ohio to get an abortion. He represents Ohio. In 2022, he was asked, do you think that there should be exceptions for rape and incest in the state's abortion ban? And he said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Rape followed by an abortion, that's 2 wrongs. 2 wrongs don't make a right. He added that the fetus or the zygote should take primacy over the woman. Which is more important? Well, here's a verbatim quote. He said, it's not whether a woman should be forced to bring a child to term, it's whether a child should be allowed to live, even though the circumstances of that child's birth are somehow inconvenient. That question really, to me, is about the baby. In other words, forget about the woman. This is all about babies. Noting that women today regard children as, quote, inconveniences to be discarded instead of blessings to cherish. This guy, who in 2019, by the way, converted to Catholicism, added in an interview with the Catholic Current newspaper, he said, there's something comparable between abortion and slavery. I think it has a morally distorting effect on the entire society. He went on to argue that the Comstock Act, which outlaws any device that can be used to produce an abortion or any drug that can be used for abortion from being sent through the mail, FedEx, UPS, or any other common carrier, the 1874, I think it is, Comstock Act, which is still on the books, as Clarence Thomas pointed out recently from the bench in the Supreme Court. The Comstock Act would end all abortions in America. And JD Vance has come out and said, we need to enforce the Comstock Act. Well, that'll shut up those uppity, ungrateful women. He's also apparently upset that women have the right to no-fault divorce. He's come out, this is another one of his great quotes. He says, this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is the idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term, end quote. He says sarcastically. He calls Kamala Harris a childless cat lady. He called AOC that also, and Pete Buttigieg. Now, for the record, Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg they're both parents of children. Kamala has 2 stepchildren with her husband, Doug Emhoff, from his first marriage. And Pete and Chastain, his husband, have adopted 2 children, twins, in fact. Sam Alito, in his Dobbs decision overturning Roe, might as well have said, a woman's place is in the bedroom and the kitchen, period. Remember how Mike Pence refused to dine with women other than his wife? Yeah, how very patriarchal, right? So, as Vance and Cruz will tell you, and they told Secretary Becerra, the job of men is to police women's menstrual periods and their travel so they don't do anything ungrateful, like getting birth control or an abortion or visiting a lawyer to get a divorce. Can't have that. You can read the whole thing complete with all the quotes and all the links to all the quotes over at HartmannReport.com today. For free. Easy. Don't even have to sign up. It's amazing stuff. I have some quotes from JD about Donald Trump I'll share with you. You probably heard most of them, but what the heck. And also some interesting stuff about, polling and just a whole bunch of interesting stuff. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Right back with you. Stay with us.